Well, I guess welcome to the Lead Young podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Josh. I'm currently in Lead Young as of this recording. I won't forever, though, be. I'm joined by the creators, the visionaries, the deep sleepers of Lead Young, our district DS, Scott Shaw, and our assistant DS, Brent Deakins. Well, glad that you guys have joined me.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, starting this podcast, we figured we'd start from the top and work our way down and figure out what is Lead Young. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and hopefully you have some answers for me. But my first question is, how did Lead Young start? Like, what was the process? What was the vision? How did it come to be?
That's a great question, Josh. When did you start working in the district office, Brent?
2020.
So in 2020, Brent started working in the district office, and one of the first things he did, his role was in church planting and multiplication and revitalization. And so we had a group of about 5 or 6 people that Brent called into a meeting. It was a combination of pastors and lay folks. They all had an entrepreneurial spirit. And Brent, why don't you just tell them about the exercise you did with the cards that day?
Yeah, so we just kind of asked the question, like, what would this, what would we like to see happen in the district in the next 10 years?
Was this pre-COVID or post-COVID in 2020?
It was post-COVID.
Okay.
So actually it was September of 2020 and then started full-time 2021.
Okay.
So it was kind of around that time. And we just asked the question, what would we want to see in our district in the next 10 years? And so we just started to dream a little and kind of think through that. And so we thought, well, how many churches would we want to plant, which would require how many leaders we'd want to get, how many churches might we think about revitalizing, and possibly, if we needed to, how many churches would we need to close? And so we just talked about that, and then on a card, I asked everybody to just put all their numbers down. And so once everybody kind of put all the information down, we just said, well, here's kind of an average of what we're thinking as a group. And it was pretty big dreams. I mean, I think we were hoping to have 100 leaders that we needed to do what we thought God wanted us to do in the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So here we had this number, 100 leaders, that we were just kind of, thinking about, dreaming about, considering. And the question, as you work with this is, where are you going to find 100 leaders? And as we work through just a number of things and see what's happening in the culture and for district superintendents today, finding leaders is a huge part of the challenge.
Why do you think that is? Why is finding leaders? Is it the type of people? Is it culture? Is it you look in the wrong place? Like, why do you think it's so hard to find leaders?
Well, I really think that people are still very much being called. I don't think that's the issue. But I do think that we as the Church of the Nazarene are at times struggling to engage young leaders in the current church. And for some young leaders, they might look at the church and say, well, I'm not sure I've got a place where I can serve. And one of the things that we'll mention to you here in a minute is I think we raised the question that said, are we engaging young leaders? Are we actively calling them into places of leadership, or are we just assuming that they'll lead or find their way? I think for a lot of experience in the Church of the Nazarene, we've kind of just had this expectation that here's the leadership path and people will find their way. And we didn't have to be very aggressive or assertive to engage young leaders.
What would you say that you talked about this path? What do you say before Lead Young? What would you say that path looked like for someone?
Well, once upon a time, we used to have a lot of leaders that would feel a call of God, go to our universities like NNU. A large percentage of those people would probably study and get started with youth ministry, maybe not thinking they would ever lead a church or pastor a church. And so that was kind of the path, and they get involved in our district ministerial development program. We're not seeing that happen as much, I think, for a number of reasons. There are young people, I think, that really do feel a call, but in some ways they're being discouraged because they're concerned about debt, school debt, those kind of things. I think I've heard of families that say, yeah, I know you have a call, but go get a degree where you're going to be able to make enough money to pay off your school loans. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is we're not seeing as many necessarily coming into youth ministry. There are other kinds of ministries that they want to pursue. Compassionate ministries would be a huge one, or maybe more entrepreneurial kind of ministries. People are kind of drawn to that. And sometimes they look at what we might call the traditional Nazarene church, mm-hmm. and they would think, yeah, no, I really don't want to go pastor one of those kind of churches. And so in our case, we have students that come to NNU, and if we're not careful and we don't actively engage them with the Church of the Nazarene, there are all kinds of new churches springing up that are full of life and vitality in the Treasure Valley where NNU exists, that, for lack of a better term, we lose them to those churches. Mm-hmm. And they just get involved in other kinds of ways. So all this kind of plays into that mix. I don't know if that answers your question, but that kind of, that created a gap. Well, where we felt like we weren't engaging young people in leadership and ministry.
I think nationally you'll see articles and reviews and information that there's less people going into ministry, and there's also a large number of people retiring and mm-hmm. going out of ministry now. So that gap even widens more because, they're looking at entrepreneurial type of jobs, they're looking at pay, and there's often just culturally right now the pastoral role is a whole different role. Mm-hmm. And so as a denomination, we're wrestling with that as well. Some of the things Scott said. I will say one other thing after that meeting, and we decided we needed several leaders. I kind of took it on myself my first year to just start interviewing young adults and asking them questions, and just had a lot of coffees and, what does the church look like for you? What mm-hmm. does it look like in the future? What would it be like if you were to plant a church? Just asking as many questions as I could. I probably had 40 plus meetings with just young adults because we really wanted as a district to try to get in their brains and understand what they were looking for as far as the church in the future. So that was kind of part of the process. And then maybe you'll get to the story about teen retreat.
Yeah. So we were thinking we need 100 leaders. We'd like to figure out a way to develop 100 leaders. And you understand they're not just going to, we can pray, and I'm not going to minimize the power of prayer. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen too many examples in my context where we pray and 100 leaders show up at the district office knocking on the door to say, here we are. Mm-hmm. So we're processing this. We're thinking about it. We're giving attention to it. And we were, a couple of years ago, we were at a pastor's retreat, our team retreat. And Carla Sundberg was the speaker there. And Carla was telling the story about how when she and Chuck went to Russia, they had a meeting with a gentleman in the Church of the Nazarene who in a way has functioned as a futurist. He's a guy that has some real skill at just not seeing today, but encouraging people to look beyond today. And so they had this meeting with him, and in that meeting, he challenged them. And he said to them, listen, if you were going to be in Russia for 10 years, what would you give? And you knew after 10 years you were done. To what would you give your attention? Where would you focus your attention? And immediately they said, well, we'd grow leaders so that when we left, Russia would be able to sustain itself into the future with the church. And then she went on to tell the story about how it just worked out that they were there 10 years. And when they left, the leadership today in Russia has its background in the investment they made in leaders. So I'm sitting at this team retreat, and I'm just thinking to myself, that's it. If we're going to find 100 leaders, we're going to have to grow them. And we're going to have to figure out a way to be very intentional to say, we've just got to, these leaders, we're going to have to invest in them and grow them and figure out a way to engage young leaders with the Church of the Nazarene to let them know that they have a future with the church. We're excited about them. We're going to empower them. You know, I got all these things going through my mind, right? So we wrap up the team retreat, and we were coming back from Trinity Pines. It's an hour and 45-minute drive.
That's for you. It's a lot longer for me.
Oh, yeah, a lot longer for you. But Brent needed a ride back, so he's in the car with me. And I said to him, Brent, here's what we need to do. We got to figure out a way to grow these 100 leaders. And this is what's going through my mind. And I just began to tell him what I was thinking and feeling. And the next thing that happened was he started adding to the conversation and just saying, yeah, I hear it. I can see the vision for this. We need to start wrestling with this. Let's figure this out. And so we had that hour, 45-minute conversation. And we got back to the office the next week, and then we just began to continue to brainstorm.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I love to do, Josh, is to put feet to vision. And so when this vision started coming through, it was resonating with me also because of all the meetings I was having. And so it was just cool because we was like, well, what would that look like? What do we need to do to empower and engage and equip these young leaders? And so we just started to put together what is currently, the Lead Young program. And, and we just started to kind of cast vision and talk about it. That group that we had another meeting within a month or so, and Kenton just heard the vision and really jumped on it. And he was like, this is what I want to give my life to in the next few years. And so kind of one thing led to another. And we've got our first year kind of under the belt, and it's been an experiment.
Well, and it was interesting because Kenton was at a place where he was transitioning out of the nonprofit, and he had experience in making something work. Josh, you can always get people who say, I could do that or I can do that, but they've never taken an idea and made it work.
Right.
Kenton had that giftedness. And so when Brent and I were talking on the way back from the team retreat, the big rocks of Lead Young were the things that we were discussing. How do we create mentors? How could we do coaches? How could we create a leadership kind of development program? All those kind of things. And like Brent said, when we got back and shared this with Kenton, man, he caught the vision, and I don't know, it was like 2 days later, he had a whole business plan. I mean, he had the whole thing kind of fleshed out so that we could take the next steps.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like you handpicked Kenton at all. It was kind of just like it happened. Or when you were first originally thinking of it, did you have certain people in mind, or just more attributes of a leader in that position?
That's a good question. I had talked to a few people, and so we were kind of thinking about things. But when we cast that vision to that group that helps on the district, you're going to probably have Kenton on soon because he's the director of this.
Yeah.
But you'll need to hear more about his experience. I mean, he basically went viral with the shoe that grows,
Right.
and because he knows how to raise money, and when he puts his passion behind something, he can make it happen. And so, for us, it was kind of a no-brainer because he just he was there at the right time, and he had the passion for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
just a happy marriage there kind of happened.
Yeah, it was great. And the other thing, I mean, I don't know if this is in right timing of the story, but Scott then started sharing this with other district leaders around the nation because we're not alone in this.
Right.
I would say when you first started being DS, you would get 2 or 3 resumes a week, and you'd start, working on trying to find placement for people. We don't get a lot of resumes in the office anymore, and so this whole concept of developing our own leaders was pretty critical.
Do you think the lack of getting resumes from people is like, I never sent my resumes to you guys. I just went on the Nazarene job board or this recommendation type of thing, asking my professors or people to apply just straight to the church rather than a district. Do you think that's kind of fed into that a little bit? Or just like you were talking about earlier, the lack of leaders for whatever reason?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, Josh. But with leaders on our district, we really have to pursue them. And for a large number of leaders, there's great hesitancy in today's world to move. So they really need to be encouraged and given opportunities to see that there are good reasons why maybe they ought to consider another assignment or whatever. Because a lot of people are just kind of staying put, and there's reasons for that. Yeah. I think COVID's had some big impact on that, and I've talked with people about that. So it's just hard to find leaders that want to move to very, very good, healthy churches. It's just interesting.
I think another thing that was important about Lead Young for us is it's not just for developing pastors and pastoral leaders. We want to have strong churches, strong and healthy churches. So that means having great board members, Sunday school teachers, youth directors, children's workers, treasurers, go down the list. And so this program really took off to be more than just developing pastors, but we have businessmen, bankers in there that are treasurers of some of our strong churches. And we just wanted to really invest in the next generation that would, lead our churches in the future.
Yeah. I mean, so I just want to back up. You guys mentioned coaches and mentors. Could you guys explain to me a little bit more the nitty-gritty? Because right now, as someone in Lead Young, I have to take classes, and I have a mentor, and I have a coach, and then I have, I guess, some gatherings, and twice a year type of gatherings. So what was the intention behind each aspect of it?
Well, I'll start with that. When we were driving down the mountain that day, we just kind of asked the question, what would it take our 3 E's are engage, equip, and empower young leaders. So what would that take? And so we brainstormed all kinds of things. And, a mentor is just someone that comes along beside a coach, intentionally asks them questions and helps them draw out their calling. We talked about gatherings where we could have intentional training, and then giving them spaces where they could experience leadership. And so at one point we had large national gatherings we were going to be able to send people to. that became a big budget issue. But we were hoping to send 20 people to Catalyst nationally, and so we're still working on some of those. But all of it stemmed out of the question: what would they need to become the next generation of leaders?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I had a conversation with a mentor a little over a week ago, who was just so very excited.
Yes.
Because they've developed a relationship with a young leader, and they attend the same church together. And there's ways that this young leader has had lots of questions about a variety of things as their church has gone through various transitions. And this mentor has been there to be really a great sounding board, a guide, a trusted individual to kind of navigate those waters. And man, that has just been, the mentor just couldn't stop talking with me about the joy they were finding and the investment that they felt they made, but the young leader was making back in them, and they were feeling very excited about kind of the future, because they have confidence that this young leader is stepping up in some really great ways. So yeah, so that's part of that mentor side.
Mm-hmm.
I think of an analogy. In Wizard of Oz, that big time thing. That what do they call those sand? When the sand's going down, it keeps track of the time. What's
old
it
school
called?
stopwatch.
Yeah, something like that.
An egg timer.
It's something like that. I'm
Sure.
sure somebody will figure that out. But you think about this huge resource that we have of older people that have been through the trials and tribulations of church and leading for years and have such experience. And then you've got this energy and passion of young adults. And sometimes it feels like they're not connected, but by this little hole where there's making these connections. So we're just trying to tip the scale and open that hole and make as many connections as we can. And yes, all of our leaders and coaches love this process. They want to invest. They want to give to the next generation. So that's been a real win for us. I want to throw another topic kind of at you. I'm in conversation right now with a pastor in another district, and he's got some young adults in his church, and he's trying to engage them. They're not necessarily ready to go into pastoral ministry, but he just texted the other day, looking for a place to find some coaching, some mentoring, maybe some leadership courses and NU courses. They're going to be great leaders in the church. He's talking about them maybe possibly getting their local license, being part of a board. But he says there's just a gap between kind of that regular church person and somebody who's full on ministry. And so I think we're trying to hit that gap as well. And I think Scott's had this conversation with district superintendents across the nation as well.
Yeah. And what we find is that there's lots of interest, but there's not been any vehicle to try to help move that forward. Now, I understand at the leadership conference, the NYI leadership conference next week, Fuller Institute and their Growing Young, the next part of that is a 10X or something, and I think they're trying to create some things, and I hope they have success. What I think we're doing on the district is able to address some of those concerns, and we've been able to do it at a cost that I think at districts it's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I know you have mentioned before that another district gave our district an amount of money, and you had mentioned that that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
And so I just want to probe about that of why would they give that amount of money? Why would they give another district? And why doesn't it happen? Because we keep talking about it's bigger than here in Intermountain.
Right.
It's a global church. So why why don't churches do that? But why would this church invest heavily in Lead Young the way they did?
Yeah. So a district in Southern California sold a piece of property, and if you sell property in Southern California, you find that creates a great deal of income for your district. And so I was having dinner with my friend, and he was telling me about selling this property, and he was so happy to have that behind them and the benefits that it was going to provide. And he said, you got anything going on in your district? And I'm like, yeah, we got no property for sale. But we do have this thing called Lead Young that we're excited about. And I began to share with him the vision, and he said, "Oh, that is so desperately needed. Can I talk to my DAB about this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." And so he talked to his DAB about it, and a few weeks later, we got a sizable check from them. And our hope is that we can take the lessons that we've learned through year one, now that we've kind of field tested this for a year, and we can offer that to another district and encourage them to take similar kinds of steps. I know that Brent and Kenton have had conversation with that district, and I think there'll be a way probably in the near future that we need to send them to Southern California to just say, here's what we've learned, and here's what maybe we can teach you, and we can develop that kind of partnership.
So their hope is to duplicate the successes of what we have here, or what do you think their end goal is?
Well, I think there is some hope because the need's so great. And going back to your earlier question, Josh, why don't we do this more? I think districts can be afraid of district initiatives that aren't field tested and don't have any, every district has ideas. When I go to district superintendent meetings, I hear about all kinds of things happening in all kinds of districts. And some of that is works in one context but wouldn't work in another. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But I think, I think if we have things where we can say we have a track record and we've learned these things and we have something that could be passed along, I think there may be some more interest in that. Because I think what you're going to see at the NYI thing in a week is that there can be this really top-down approach. So Fuller comes out with this deal, and it's impressive because they've got $1 million behind it, and they get a certain level of buy-in, but I don't know what kind of ownership that they'll get. There's some resources that are there. We've got more of a bottom-up grassroots approach. And here again, I think it could be beneficial and helpful. And especially if we have, through people like you, some positive stories of ways that it's benefited, and we've encouraged and grown some leaders. So, yeah.
Guys, it's called an hourglass. I found it for you. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I grew up with a phone in my hand, so we never needed those. Unless there was some board game that I needed it for.
I should make a comment about being older, but
be careful.
I am curious, Josh, when you first heard about it, like what intrigued you about it? And I think you came to the first kickoff summit that we did last April.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had mentors, and so that mentor and coach thing really got me. And I was new to the district still, and so the gatherings appealed to me, in which of, meet new people my age sounds good to me, kind of thing. And so I've always had mentors and seen the value in that. And so if I can get my hands on those kind of resources, then I'm going to take the advantage of it. The classes, I'm not a great school guy, but I'll take the classes kind of thing. And so that leads me into my next question is why the classes, why 4 classes, sets of 4 weeks, why the particular subjects or classes, or how did that kind of play in and come to be? Was that existing beforehand, or was it made just for Lead Young?
Yeah, I can answer that. When we started talking about some training program, we went to NNU because we're basically right there, and they have kind of a professional development arm that they offer leadership courses to businesses, school districts all over. And so we started having a conversation with them on what that would look like for us. And they normally do 6 courses, but those are targeted specifically to industry and business and other things. And so just kind of how we had to massage it and work it a little bit to get there. Our goal was to actually give back to Lead Young people not only the leadership training and professional experience and connections, but also like a leadership certificate that they could put on their resume and use as they launch into their professional career. So it kind of was a mixture of all of that put together. We're still thinking about what is the best and what kind of feedback are we getting on not only those courses, but other ways that we can, our main goal is to equip and empower and engage young adults. And so whatever we can do, that's kind of what our focus is. But that, how it laid out, all the specifics and courses and Zooms and this and that, just basically had to do with that conversation with NNU and what they had to offer.
Mm-hmm. And then the last piece I guess we're missing is the gatherings. You guys have spoken at the gatherings, been at those things. So what's the goal of those things? They typically, how they go is a little bit of worship, a speaker, lunch, speaker, maybe some breakout. That's how this podcast came to be, was that I know they've been talking about the Lead Summit as their big gathering, but these little gatherings, what do you think the goal is? What's the idea behind those of that?
I think it's a matter of connection. As much as the mentoring and the coaching kind of happens more on an individual basis, we do hope that we develop a cohort that is able to function and make connections with other people, be a part of the community, stay connected to the wider district and those kind of things. And so to have kind of a teaching or instruction piece and an inspiration piece and all of those kind of things for that cohort, we think that provides a good opportunity for that group to feel a sense of togetherness. Mm-hmm. So they're not just 20 plus individuals, but they are a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something Kenton will probably address later in a podcast. Is one thing we learned is we did not have enough connection. One of the reasons you said is you wanted to connect with more young adults.
Yeah.
And so we learned this year that we need to provide more opportunities for that, an initial gathering, some more things where you could feel more connected throughout the year. Mm-hmm. And connection is an important point. The other thing that we looked at is just we kind of thought about that TED Talk thing where somebody gives subject matter on leadership, mm-hmm. and that we would do a way to bring the connection and also some training together. So like last one, you heard Carly Bartlett share mm-hmm. her testimony and story of her calling. That's an inspirational moment where some people can go, oh man, I've kind of had a calling moment myself into leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kenton's done a good job because along with those summits, they've also created some young adult gatherings that kind of expands, because that's the thing we want. While we invest in the current group, we also want to utilize that group to reach other young adults across the district and encourage them to be involved as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we keep talking about this number of 100, and so I know typically I think we have 20 or 21 this year. I know the goal was 25 originally, and so does that mean after 4 years of this you have your 100 you've done? Does it end? Does it keep going because you need more 100? What do you do after you've hit your 100 mark?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're evaluating as we move forward. So I think we have a meeting even tomorrow with Kenton to try to do some evaluating on what the current cohort has experienced and how this current cohort might be able to invest into the next.
Mm-hmm.
So the summit will be about recruiting the next. I mean, I don't anticipate that our need for young leaders is going to go away. The big question is, how do we keep refining what we're doing to reach them? And, that's part of the goal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like Scott said, you don't just pray and 100 knock on the door the next day. And so it's kind of a process of developing. We thought maybe if we had 25 the first year, we wanted it to be manageable while we're working on this and then to become sustainable. So yes, we did look at a 4-year plan of, what would it look like to have 25 a year? And then after year 4, we'd have 100 that we could use and draw from. And depending on who the leader is, some might want to stay in some coaching for another year or two. Some might feel really strong and want to become a coach or become a mentor, or like you're doing right now, you're stepping up and making a podcast happen. I mean, that's awesome. That's kind of the next stages, is letting our young adults dream and become great at what they're great at and helping expand this program. We have other young adults that want to be more engaged in their church now, or they may want to help lead the summit in the future, or there'll be testimony speakers sharing their calling plan. And so really the sky's the limit. I mean, that's the funnest thing for me about the young adult, is that God can dream in major ways through our young people. And we want to do everything we can to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And so, as we come to the summit, as in a month or so, and that first cohort ends, I know there's been talks of what do you do with that cohort. You talked about plugging them in, but is there anything in particular you would like to see them do? Whether it be, you mentioned continuing mentoring or coaching, or what does it look like for the people once they go through Lead Young, they finish, they did all their classes, they did everything they were supposed to. What do they do now?
Well, I think one of the critical pieces is to utilize those experiences in leadership. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of just I've checked this off the list and I can. I think there's going to be great opportunity for those Lead Young, that first cohort, to invest into the next cohort and be involved, be engaged. And I think you would agree, if you were to come to one of the smaller summits and it isn't just a group of 20, but it's a group of 50, or if it's a group of 75, or if it's a group of 100, that just increases the connection. It increases the vision. It increases and provides opportunity for all those kind of things. I just think that this continued investment check-in, what are you doing with the leadership that you've begun to experience? How do you put that into practice? I think that's a critical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you've heard, process over product, right? It's not really a check off. I really appreciate that, what Scott's saying. It really is a process of growth and leadership. And I would hope that our current ones want to stay in that process and engaged with the things that we have going on. And I think it'll be individual. Your process is going to be different than the 20-something others that are involved in it now. Mm-hmm. So we got to kind of figure out how to individualize that as well.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about the 100, and you want 100 new leaders. And so obviously there's some clergy, including myself, that are in that number of 100 who are already leaders in some capacity, whether it be part-time or full-time or whatever it be for them. So is it you need to find really 120 or 130 because of the numbers and the way they shake out in that?
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, the number 100 stood out to us, but it's just
a nice,
number.
clean number, you
right?
know?
Yeah, it's more a matter of how can we engage with young adults. Quick story. I'll make it quick because Brent gives me grief about long
I
stories.
love your stories.
We got all the time in the world.
Yeah, great. When we were in this process, and I don't know, we were dreaming about these 100 leaders, and I don't know if it was before or after I heard Carla's presentation. I was listening to a podcast one day, and the guy made his whole podcast was, he says, I'm going to give you 3 words. And the 3 words are you, here, now. And then he began to just emphasize the priority of you as a person, who you are, how God has made you. And then there was the here, your place, where you are, location, all those kind of things. And then the now was this sense of urgency. We need to get you off the bench into the game. I mean, all those kind of things. So I listened to this podcast and I'm thinking to myself, you here now. Those words have stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we were just in the start of trying to figure out lead young, I told Brent, I said, Brent, we need to call this group YHN. The You Here Now group, because it's all about empowering young adults, who they are, who are right here to be engaged now. You don't have to wait. It's not later. And I think that same passion, that You Here Now passion, is what's really at the heart of Lead Young. So a guy like you, Josh, or the other participants, it's not a matter of we're trying to train or prepare you for something into the future. No. It's engaging young leaders to say, right now, the Church of the Nazarene has a place for you in your local church or wherever to serve. And we're trying to figure out how we can build a fire and a passion within young leaders for that right today. So, I'm not going to complain if we find 150 rather than 100. But that's really the passion of our heart. How do we encourage young leaders to engage at that level?
So why didn't we get this labeled You Here Now? Why is it labeled Lead Young?
Branding took over. The branding company took over, and
Yeah, and I just get to hold on to that story, Josh. Deep in my heart, Josh. This is the YHN group, but I'll let them be Lead Young.
The other thing I was thinking is part of the passion of this is to help young leaders find their direction, find their purpose. Yeah. I have 3 daughters, 22, 20, 18 right now, and I just know that in this stage of life, people are trying to find meaning, trying to find purpose. What's God calling me to? What's He wanting me to be in the future? And so if we can come alongside people as they're going through that process and that journey, we just think that it's for the benefit of mankind, people, all that, but these young leaders and then our churches. The church has an amazing mission to share the good news of Jesus around the world. And the more we have young adults engaged in their purpose and meaning to understand what God's called them to and who He's called them to be, this is the primary purpose of the church. And, we have young adults, but we have Sunday school kids, we have all ages. I mean, your church does upward basketball. Yeah. What's the purpose of that? Look at the meaning behind it. So it really is about the why, not about getting 150 or 99. I mean, we just really care about what God's doing in young adults here in our district and hopefully extending.
Yeah, and I guess I would add one more thing to what Brent said. We really want young adults to know that the Church of the Nazarene carries this kind of passion for them and for their mission in the world. They don't have to go somewhere else. We want to do everything we can to fuel that passion in terms of who we are and the calling God's given us.
Mm-hmm. And so, as we launch this podcast, this is going to be the first episode, and hopefully we get this done by the conference coming up, so you'll have people from all around the country listening to this. And so what would you want to say to students who go, well, I don't know what this Lead Young thing is, I'll listen to this podcast and hopefully it gives me some more details of what it is. What would you want to say to them? What would you want to say to the local pastor who has a kid in Lead Young or wants to be in Lead Young? And then what would you want to say to the district leadership, whether it be the district that has given us money to start this or to a district that's thinking about something similar to it? What would you want to say to those three people?
Yeah, I think I'd want to say that we've had a passion that we believe God has really placed upon our hearts for this. We field tested this for a year, and we feel like we're making progress in providing a very practical, workable opportunity for districts and young leaders. And, the mission that we have to encourage and engage, that's just an equip. It just makes sense for us to be involved in this way. And I think every district has the resources to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can learn, or if we can help facilitate that, we'd be more than happy to have any conversation with anybody just to say, here's what we've done. You can take whatever we've done and use it and make it work on your district, adapt it, make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that would be my message. We really are just looking for young adults and trying to do what we can to partner them with folks within the life of the church who will stimulate their growth in Christ and as church leaders, whether they be ministers or lay folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just looking back at some of our notes from the initial, because it really comes down to the why. They've probably heard this quote before from John Wesley: "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and desire nothing but God, and I care not a straw." I mean, this is good stuff. Whether they be churchmen, clergymen, or laymen, such alone will shake the gates of hell and set up the kingdom of heaven on earth. And so from there, we have this kind of passion to ignite spiritual leadership. We know that there's going to be and starting to become a void in leadership in the church. And so, how do we find, every young person I talk to is just passionate about Jesus and wanting to see something happen. And so how do we find passionate followers of Jesus to ignite this spiritual passion again and attract them into the church of today and tomorrow? And so I would say to those young people, we see you, we want to serve you, we want to come alongside of you, and we want to give you the keys to the church. And we have a great hope for you in the future. And I think we'd say that to districts, you're crazy not to invest in a program like this, because it really is the future of the church. So we'd say that to young adults, we'd say that to pastors even today. Find those leaders and get them engaged in Lead Young or something like this,
Mm-hmm.
to give them the keys, because the passion's there. And that hourglass that we talked about,
The hourglass.
we're gonna open that middle section so the connections are made quicker and more efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
to give you the keys.
I would disagree with one thing Brent said.
Good. We need some conflict.
But I would just say, he mentioned this is the future. No, this is the present.
Mm-hmm.
We've got young leaders that we're desperately needing to engage, and they want to. We just have to figure out the ways, as he said, to open the opportunities for them in that way. And so this isn't something merely as we look ahead to say, someday you'll get off the bench into the game.
Mm-hmm.
No, we need these young leaders in the game today, you know. And so I just think that's a high priority. We're trying to equip young leaders to serve the church today.
And so would this be a similar pitch to as we get mentors and coaches and people in upper leadership like that, or is it kind of a different pitch about investing in leaders, and how do you convince someone to become one of those people?
It's not hard.
No.
We did a sign-up sheet a year ago or such at District Assembly, and it's amazing how many people. Our biggest difficulty in that sign-up process was that I think we had more people sign up than we needed, and they wanted to be engaged, but we only needed 20 or 25, and we had. I mean, Kenton had a long list to call and engage with to find out where their gifts and strengths were. It's not hard. The next generation or the older generation wants to pour in, but I think the truth is they just don't know how. And Lead Young even gives them an opportunity to engage in really powerful, significant ways.
Yeah. I mean, Josh, if you're an older person, I was just looking at some notes that I took when I was interviewing all these young people my first year. And I mean, they're saying, I want a place that will invest in me, that trusts me with real opportunities, that will help me develop relationships. I want a place that I can serve and use my gift, that I'm invited into. I heard young adults say, man, I need to be challenged. I want to see real transformation, not only in my life, but in the church and in my community. There's just this huge desire and passion. And one of them, Rachel, she said, I want to be given the keys to the church. Like, I want some barriers to be removed, and I want the church to say, no, I trust you with the church. And there's nothing that gives me goosebumps as an older person to think about a younger person saying those things to me and wanting to basically say, I want to be part of the transformation of the church. It's going to look different than it did 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. And they want to be part of investing into that. So that sparks such enthusiasm and joy from anyone who's older than our target range.
And so to go back, you guys originally it started with what does it look like in 10 years? And so now that we have pretty much a year under our belt, from your perspective, where do you see it in 10 years? If we could fast forward another 9, where do you see the people that helped out with Lead Young, the people that went through the program? What do you see on the district and even further than that in other districts? Where do you see that in the next?
Well, my expectation, my hope in 10 years is that we would have some pastors like you serving who would live with a priority given to being a coach or a mentor, and your passion for Jesus would just be off the charts in terms of how do we help people come into relationship with Jesus. And as much as I think about you as a pastor, in 10 years, it's my hope that we have board members, Sunday school teachers or small group leaders, whatever we're going to call it in 10 years, we would have those same kind of passionate folks who would say, man, I just, something was ignited in me in this Lead Young experience that has fueled a passion for Jesus that's then communicated into the way I lead my small group, the way I serve in my church. And I want my church to be a vibrant, dynamic place. That's my hope. Because as much as we need pastors and those kind of leaders, we need vibrant, dynamic church members who just have this passionate love for Jesus and want to see people come into relationship with Jesus and live and grow in Him. So our hope, that's my hope in 10 years, that would be the fruit of what takes place here.
Yeah, Josh, I'm praying for revival. we need a move of the Spirit of God in such a dramatic way across our country, in our communities, in our schools, in our homes, that something like this might ignite a spiritual passion that just cannot be stopped. And it not only will transform our churches, but all parts of our lives. And so, I mean, to me, it's part of just that spark of igniting a revival in our churches, in our homes, in our young adults. And, if you look back through history, all great revivals have been started by younger generations. And so we just want to do our part to help facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
When we had the original summit a year ago, I believe there were 118 young people in that gathering at Lakewood Nazarene.
Yeah, Lakeview Nazarene.
Lakeview.
Yeah.
The worship was dynamic as those people came and gathered. They didn't even know what they were coming to, really, other than it was just going to be kind of a young people's event. But I remember sitting in that gathering and worshiping that gathering and said, there's something happening in this environment that that is opening the possibilities for the Spirit of God to move.
Yeah.
And when we got done with that gathering and the message was shared, I had young people come to me because I was the oldest guy in the room.
Well, there's 117 young people there.
Are you counting yourself in that 117?
Thanks for calling my thanks for calling my wife young.
Well,
I appreciate
you're
that.
welcome.
But I had young people come to me when it's done and say, I so desperately need this. Now, what I'm hearing is that a year later, that individual who came to me and said, I'm so desperately needing this, has been linked up with a mentor that has had a powerful impact upon his life.
That's awesome.
And so, from that first summit, what took place, to see the fruit of that, man, I just see that we haven't done everything right, but there's been some powerful things that have happened that have reached the goal that we were trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think back on our conversation just down the mountain, and I want to just say to young adults, dream big. Let God dream big through you. Don't be afraid of something like, oh, we need 100 leaders. Well, we might as well roll over and die. I mean, no. We want to come alongside, and as you dream, help resource that and give, experience and all the things we can to help you dream.
That's awesome. One last question for you guys is, as people hear this and maybe think about signing up for the second year of cohort 2, what are some things that might be different than what I've personally experienced? Like, for example, I've met with a coach and a mentor every month. I've had 2 gatherings, not including the summit. And then I've taken 4 classes of 4 weeks each per class. So what are some changes that are coming to the second cohort that people can get excited about?
Yeah, I think the excuse me. I think the coaching and the mentoring side is gonna. I mean, that's at the backbone of what we're doing, and there is a teaching training side that's going to be consistent. How that is delivered and what the focus of that teaching will be, I think we'll be undergoing some change. Just because we stepped into what we might call, and we talked about this the other day, more of a generic leadership teaching program within NU, and whether that's the best for the nature of the cohort, that may shift some, and so that's kind of in development. In fact, we're having some conversation, I think, tomorrow about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow, and then our Lead Young team meets in 2 weeks to kind of review. I think you're going to see more connections with the cohort. You're going to see deeper coaching. Each of our coaches are going to be either certified or go through a coaching certification program. So you're going to see some deeper coaching. I think you're also going to see, we tried to do kind of a personal calling plan where you'd come out of this experience like, oh, I know my calling now, but
Mhm.
more of like a written, detailed plan. I don't think you necessarily have that right now. I don't know about your experience, Josh,
Mhm.
but I mean, so I think you're going to just see some things that we've done well, done even better, and
Mhm.
some things that we've missed, especially the connections happen a lot better
Mhm.
this year. So I hope it'll be a fantastic experience, and we'll just be able to see another cohort of 25 and maybe even grow from there.
Mhm.
I think one other piece too, Josh, is we've had conversation and we've kind of got it in our future, but we will be, NYC is coming to Salt Lake City
Yep.
in 26, and part of our dream and plan is that our lead young participants will be engaged somehow,
Mhm.
because I know they'll need to be leaders and helpers, whatever the role, aides, and our hope is that at that point in time we could say to the folks at NYI, we've got
Mhm.
potentially 75 folks that
Mhm.
we'd like for you to put to work in some way,
Yeah, that would
and
be
that
awesome.
can be a beneficial thing for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Well, I hope people get excited about Lead Young listening to this and listening to Kenton and interviewing everyone else a part of it. But I think you guys have done a great job at casting a vision and giving people a better understanding of what Lead Young is as a whole and what goes into it on the backbone, and also what people can expect for the next couple of years about that. So I just want to thank you guys for your time and your vision, casting, and all that goes into Lead Young and preparing those things for me and everyone else in the cohort, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And I think a sign off is like "Go Lakers" or "Go Warriors."
No,
Right?
I mean, Celtics
Yeah.
are.
Is that your best sign off?
I think that probably works, seeing that he's wearing that the green, even his headphones have that green.
You're right.
Right, green
Go
tint.
Celtics.
So, oh man.
Well, I mean, Lead Young's green too, so.
Remember, you hear now, YHN once upon a time, Josh.
Yeah, it would have been Warrior Yellow.
It
Yeah,
didn't.
ugh.
It didn't fly,
Ugh.
but that was part of the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Well,
having us,
Yeah,
Josh.
thanks.
It's been fun.
Thanks for being here.